Good afternoon. My name is Susan Doyle and I will be your facilitator today on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. I would like to welcome you to this Lean Construction Ireland webinar presented by Dr. Avril Behan from Technological University Dublin on Lean Construction, Industry and Academic Partnerships Delivering Better, Faster Together. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Avril after the presentation. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The speaker for today is Dr. Avril Behan from Technological University Dublin. Avril is Director and Dean of the College of Engineering and Built Environment at TU Dublin. She is a chartered geomatic surveyor and holds a PhD in the application of geomatics to architectural historical studies. She is TU Dublin lead investigator on the EU-funded BIM CERT project. She chairs the SCSI BIM Interprofessional Working Group, is vice chair of SCSI's Geomatics Profession Group, is a member of both the UK and the Irish BIM Academic Fora, is a member of the Building Smart BSI UKI Steering Committee for the development of the UKI BSI Professional Certification Programme in Open BIM, is the international representative on the Survey for BIM Working Group of the UK BIM Task Group, and is a member of the RIA Geosciences and Geographical Sciences Committee. Integration of lean construction with BIM is an area of special interest and links her as a director of LCI. I will now pass you over to Avril to start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Susan. Welcome everybody to this webinar. And as Susan has said, the topic for the webinar today is Lean Construction and Digital Adoption, Industry and Academic Partnerships, Delivering Better, Faster Together. So as you can see, I have blatantly plagiarized the LCI motto, and it is the case that that is the goal of what I want to show with today's presentation. I'm probably going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then I'm more than happy to answer any questions that may arise, as Susan has said, that are coming through from the chat. So just in terms of the contents for what I'm going to go through today, so I want to start with the why of lean and digital adoption, why the two should be worked on together. I'm going to mention a little bit about global communities of practice, and then I'm going to talk mostly about the gaps and the opportunities that are available for lean and digital adoption integration in terms of partnerships between industry working with academia. And in academia, I am talking generally about all of the HEI sector, although obviously, as my bio said, I work at Technological University Dublin, but I do apply this, or some of what I'm talking about applies to more broadly across the HEI sector in Ireland. So many of you may be aware or may have previously seen this particular matrix from Raphael Sachs and the team at Technicon in Israel. Raphael presented this at the International Group for Lean Construction conference that took place in Dublin 2 years ago. But it's from a piece of work that originated in 2010. And I suppose it's important to point out that it was 2010 because there has been some movement, particularly in relation to BIM, since that piece of work originated. But what we have shown on the slide here is a demonstration of just how much interaction, positive interaction there is between the concepts of lean and the concepts of BIM. And I suppose before I go any further, one of the things that I should emphasize here is that when I talk about BIM and digital adoption, I'm talking about the full BIM process. So it's not just the fact that BIM enables the design in 3 dimensions, enables things like clash avoidance, etc. It's that BIM is actually a full set of workflows and standards-based processes that really have significant amounts of alignment with lean. So this slide that's here in front of you, and by the way, the slides will be available after the presentation. What is showing here is the green boxes are demonstrating interactions, positive interactions that are happening between principles in Lean with activities or particular areas within BIM, or what BIM is actually capable of. So if I take an example here of column F, which is reduced cycle times, one of the things that we're aware of in terms of construction is that whenever changes are being made, that is causing a delay in terms of process. And obviously the impact of any changes is going to increase its impact as we move further through the design process and into activities on site. So one of the significant benefits in terms of BIM is the ability to digitally construct before you actually construct on site. Excuse me. So in the States and in parts of Europe, this is obviously called virtual design and construct as opposed to BIM, but both terms in this context are interchangeable. So what you can see is that in terms of trying to reduce the issues of time and lost time, which obviously we know lost time impacts on program, which then impacts on cost, which then impacts on clients ultimately. If we can reduce the cycle times and get changes made more quickly, then we'll have a more positive output. So on the left-hand side here of the diagram, you can see the range of BIM functionalities that create a positive impact on the Lean desire of reducing cycle times. So in that, we have the rapid generation and evaluation of multiple design alternatives. We've got maintenance of information. We've got automatic generation of documentation. And as we know, we're talking now about that documentation being fully three-dimensional and being accessible within the model as opposed to having to be output onto paper, etc. So that particular interaction matrix, I suppose, is something that demonstrates why we should be looking at Lean and BIM as a positive. And just in a little bit more detail, this is just showing an example here of reducing variability. As we know in terms of Lean, one of the principles is trying to standardize your work, standardize it, make it operate properly, and then you can start to do continuous improvement on top of it. But doing continuous improvement before you've actually standardized is a false activity in terms of doing it. So how does BIM enable us to reduce variability? Well, it has that collaboration piece. And I was going to try not to mention the pandemic during this talk, but it's absolutely impossible not to. And one of the things I suppose we've all realized over the last 15 months or so has been that collaboration around design and construction is, we've needed to think about it in a different way. We've needed to engage in it in a different way. And maybe this is one of the things that I would like to say that we've probably come out of maybe more positively, in that some of the collaborations were maybe more forced. The design team meetings might have happened more regularly. And because of the digital space that we were doing them, maybe it might have been a more positive experience. So the ability of BIM and the common data environments that are used now within most BIM systems, whether we're talking about BIM 360 or whether we're talking about visual tools or what other interactive environments, they now allow multiple users to engage jointly in that same space. And that means that we're having a collaborative multidisciplinary review. So long gone is the throwing drawings across a wall and waiting to see whether or not people get things right. So that all drives towards the same thing as we want from Lean, which is that getting quality right first time and overall improving quality. And it would be interesting to see if in the chat later on there is any comments from anybody who has been doing some of this directly in the field, and whether they do feel that the activities over the last number of months have actually improved an amount on it. And one of the other things that Raphael would have talked about when he spoke to us, and it's in this book that he has, which is called Building Lean and Building BIM, is a range of the other different activities where you have Lean interacting and engaging positively with BIM. And we can see there we've got value stream mapping. You've got advanced offsite fabrication, which I'm going to refer back to later on, which is a hugely important topic for us in Ireland at the moment as we move to try and address some of our construction sector issues. but also client change coordination, etc. So there's a range of different issues there that you can see. So this particular book, very good reference in terms of looking at how the synergies can be brought between the areas of lean and BIM generally. But I suppose I'd like to talk to it more in terms of not just BIM, but digital adoption, because I know that for a lot of companies, the term BIM has maybe become associated with just certain tools, certain pieces of software. And really, as I outlined at the beginning, for me and the understanding that I have it and what we would teach our students within TU Dublin and when we would be doing our interactions, it's very much about BIM is about a process. It's about much more than just a single tool or even a grouping of tools come together. So on the top diagram there, or of the screen, what you have there is you have an example of what the recommended lean journey here is. And I refer to this from much more expert voices than myself, which would be the like of Darren Taylor, who's spoken at a number of LCI events, and Peter Hines, Professor Peter Hines, who is adjunct professor in WIT at the Lean Enterprise Excellence Forum. And I suppose the theory of lean is that you would start with the principles, you would then create the systems that enable those principles to be used, and then you would apply certain tools to it. However, as we know, particularly in the construction sector, the journey around lean typically starts with tools. So somebody might start with Last Planner, or they might look at A3s, or they might be considering bringing in 5S or something like that. The tools are very accessible and they're very easy to implement if there's a will to do so. However, the tools can only get you so far. After you start to use the tools, then you need to bring in systems which allow you to join together different tools. And sometimes after that, it can come to, okay, holistically, how do we then build in these principles as something that we want to have organizationally within, so that they influence everything that is actually going to be done. And I think it was Darren had said before as well on a previous conversation that, you know, the tools, you can almost implement them overnight. Whereas if you want to actually embed lean as an operational principle, you're talking about journeys that are 5, 10, multiple years. And if you look back, I suppose, at the archive of webinars that are available on the Lean Construction Ireland website, you'll see the journeys that some of our member companies have actually undergone and how long it has taken them to embed lean. But equally, I suppose one of the important things is that you need to continuously work at it. It's not something that you can put in place and then walk away and it'll look after itself. No, it's about continuously looking at it. So the second line there on the slide that you can see is about the journey for digital adoption, and it has amazing parallels. Again, the recommended journey, or the recommended piece, is that you get the people side of things lined up in the first instance, then you implement the processes, and then you apply whatever tools are appropriate to allow you to implement the processes. But the reality is, for most organizations, that they'll start with the tools. So it might be a case of something like, okay, we're going to buy a couple of licenses for Revit or Vectorworks or Navis or some other sort of software. We'll send our staff on maybe a 3-day training course and off we go. There's benefit comes from that. That certainly does serve companies well. However, at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, that one tool, it can enable us to do certain things, but it doesn't allow us to actually maximize the benefit for the organization. So it's about then, okay, well, what processes do we need to put in place on top of this? And while there are lean ISO systems, for BIM, there is a very significant body of standards and reference guidance documentation that is available internationally now through the ISO standards, and previously would have been there as the PAS 1192 standards from the UK. And there's been a huge amount of work done here in Ireland in terms of producing the local annex for the ISO 19650 BIM standards to make sure that this is actually applicable in Ireland. But there's still a body of work to do in relation to making this fully accessible for organizations as part of their digital adoption journey. And then, you know, the typical, I suppose, item after that is getting all people on board, and the number of organizations we would have talked to. So obviously we'd have students in TU Dublin who are working in the sector. And we often have a lot of people who would come on our programs, and they're doing it out of interest. They've heard how good it is, and they first of all start by getting one license bought into the organization, and then they're trying to actually persuade the C-suite that this digital adoption is something that needs to be done more broadly. And as we know, there can be drivers and external levers in terms of pre-qualifiers on contracts and stuff like that. But I suppose it's because these two journeys have so much synergies that's another factor in terms of explaining why we should be looking at both of these two elements together. So I suppose just in terms of a further reason why now we should be having this conversation around lean and digital adoption is obviously over the last 15 months, there has been a very enforced set of guidance or changes in terms of how we work. And I specifically chose the picture on the left there, which does show a gentleman working in a lovely remote setup. He has multiple screens, big desk, lots of natural light. But there is just one little difficulty there in the middle of it, that child on his knee with the phone in hand. And we've all had significant challenges, and some more than others, in terms of the idea of working from home. And there's a lot of colleagues now, and I would have this both with the staff that we're working with, and obviously the students who we're working with, who are working in companies as well. And there are a lot of people who just can't wait to get back to the office. And there are other organizations for whom the revolution of being able to allow people to work from home is something that they really want to have benefit from. So I suppose there's an opportunity now for organizations to really think about, how is it that we are actually going to bring people back on site, and why will it be that we'll actually bring them back on site? And I actually had an interesting conversation with an industry leader on Tuesday, where they were saying that one of the big challenges that they've had in terms of people working from home is the security within their home environments. And it's not necessarily the cyber security, but it's that they might have images on screen or things on their desk, and the desk that they're working at is the kitchen table, and you've got somebody comes in for a cup of coffee or something, and they may be working on a project where there's a non-disclosure agreement in place, and it's about how do you manage the security of that. So it may well be for certain types of projects, it really is essential to continue to do them in the office. But equally, in terms of the picture that's on the right-hand side there, you can see in the background the board, which could be a Kanban board or something similar. And similar to, I suppose, how things like the last planner system are used, etc. It's those pieces of collaboration where people sitting in a room together are able to, or standing in a room together or moving post-its around on a board, are going to be able to achieve far more than if you're doing that in a system where, let's say, you're using digital post-its. There's something about the tangible that really is benefit. And I think many of you may have heard as well, Glenn Ballard, when he was over again at the IDLC conference and other conferences, speaking about the benefit of actually having people in a room together, and the necessity of picking up a post-it of a particular color and moving it to a place, and everybody else seeing that activity is going on. There is a huge benefit to it. So I think that's something that the strategies for coming back onto site are something that certainly need to be considered by organizations. We also have, I suppose at the moment, again, the reason for the why now really is just some of the issues that we are particularly dealing with nationally in the country. So obviously at the moment, there's the drive around Project Ireland 2040. And some of you may have heard me speak about this. I think it was last year at the Lean Construction Ireland conference, where we tried to bring together some of the ideas around Project Ireland 2040 and things that were coming from it. But as a nation, we need our construction sector to be functioning as well as it possibly can in order to underpin the development strategy and the development intentions of the country. So you can see that within Project Ireland 2040, there's a range of different publications. There's things around the National Development Programme, there's environmental impacts, there's etc. But one of the biggest challenges that we know we're all facing at the moment is that challenge around sustainability and achieving the targets of the Climate Action Plan. And equally, that would have come from the EU targets that are in place. And if we don't start to work better with our digital tools and in a more lean way as a construction sector, the ability to deliver for Project Ireland 2040 is not going to be there. I picked out two other, I suppose, particular subsectors within that, and that's not discounting the fact that obviously we need to have, to look at the Project Ireland in its broader terms. But I suppose two particular areas that we would be very conscious of. One is obviously the significant drive around still needing to solve the housing crisis and still needing to improve productivity within the construction sector to be able to address the needs of our growing population. I think it was PJ Rudden last week at DigiCon mentioned that we expect that by 2040, or I can't remember, 2040 or 2050, that there'll be another 1 million people living on the island of Ireland, and we will need to have more accommodation that is available for them. So coming up with better methods of doing that is certainly something that we need to do. Equally, the IDA recently published their strategic plans over the next number of years, and you can see there in the center of your screen some of the core sectors that they are looking at and emerging trends that they have and areas of opportunity. And again, there isn't one of these core sectors that doesn't need us in the construction sector to actually feed into and act as a platform from which they can springboard. So we need development in our infrastructure. So that obviously our public transport systems, our road, our rail systems, but obviously becoming hugely important and even more important than it has been recently is the like of our ports. So particularly with the land bridge over the UK becoming more difficult, the developments in our ports are hugely important. And again, going back to, I suppose, the climate resilience piece, but equally the sorts of industries, high value industry that we're trying to bring into the country, energy and the ability to develop renewable energy sources and then build the infrastructure that will allow that energy to be distributed around the country to the places that's needed. That's hugely important. So again, I suppose that's just a bit of context setting in terms of the national opportunity and the necessity that we have around digital adoption. But that I would contend that digital adoption should absolutely be done in a way that is conscious of lean principles so that we maximize the benefit of what we're doing. So again, apologies for those of you who may have seen the CIF's DigiCon conference last week. This is just a repeat of, I suppose, some of the activities that are currently going on in Ireland to support digital adoption in Ireland. And while the word lean doesn't appear in any of these specifically, I would again contend that the lean principles should be being applied within all of these innovation and digital adoption actions. So in particular, I suppose I would like to highlight the offsite production sector group. So that's being led through the CIF, and I believe there's a report fairly imminently due to actually demonstrate what activities and what further actions construction in Ireland should actually take in order to adopt more modular construction. And if you look at the works of the like of Raphael Sachs and Technicon, you could see that modular construction and lean construction, they work very closely in parallel, and one can be of significant benefit to the other. In fact, I suppose when you think about it, lean construction would have emanated out of the manufacturing sector. So the more that construction becomes like manufacturing, the better benefits that we're going to be able to bring from one to the other. And of course, there's, the benefits of offsite include things like the quality assurance that we're able to do, the standardization, the ability to control timelines and all sorts of other factors in a much better way. Many of you as well may be aware that there is at the moment a survey in circulation from Enterprise Ireland on a detailed description of needs for a national centre of excellence for the construction sector. And I suppose we've long in the sector recognised that that's something that is absolutely essential. And for any of you who do get a chance to do that survey or have already done so, there is a brief mention of lean in it, but I do think from Lean Construction Ireland's perspective, that's something that we need to, I suppose, emphasize for Enterprise Ireland the importance of having lean underpinning there. And Enterprise Ireland certainly do understand it, given their supports that they already have for lean initiatives through multiple of the programs that they would operate. In terms of the Build Digital project as well, there's an announcement fairly imminently due on that, I believe, and that's the setting up of a centre of excellence to promote BIM and digital adoption. And again, in that, as I've just shown in previous slides, there is such an overlap between the two of them. So it's important that as that centre of excellence rolls out, and there will be opportunities within that, I believe, for significant amounts of industry engagement and industry participation to make sure that what is happening through that centre is actually meeting the needs of the sector. Then I think the lean community definitely needs to step up and show where what they have done in the past has worked, and how that can be rolled out more broadly to actually improve for Ireland Inc. and for the broader sector. So there is a link there on the slides to the LinkedIn group that the digital construction sector, that the innovation and digital adoption group have, and from there you can get a link to the survey for anyone who's interested in it. So that was, I suppose, just kind of giving the why of the why and the why now of the digital adoption and synergies. For those of you who may be at an early stage in your lean journeys, or maybe even at a stage in your leaner journeys where you want to actually go deeper than maybe using some of the basic tools, I'd just like to bring to your attention some of the global communities of practice that are in existence. And the first point to make to you on this one is that with the newly redeveloped Lean Construction Ireland website, there's a lot of this information is very readily accessible on the link that you can see at the bottom of the page there, just the resources section. And one of the primary sources that we have is the Lean Construction Institute from the US. And they would have publications going back for 15, 20 years from all of the conferences that would have taken place with the Lean Construction Institute. And I had the great pleasure a couple of years ago with the colleague Brian Clare and with Mercury Engineering to actually attend one of these conferences. And what was amazing about it was just the interaction that was happening there between practitioners, organizations that on the ground were living the lean story, with the academic community and people at very different stages within their journey. And one of the things that's, I suppose, really important about the information that you can get on that Lean Construction Institute website is that all of the papers that are published, or all of the presentations that are published at the conferences, they've actually all been kind of through a double peer review. And when I say peer review, it's not an academic peer review, it's a peer review by practitioners in the sector, because they first of all have to be presented at their local chapter, and then they have to get approval and authorization to go from there to this national and actually international conference. So the quality of the work that you're seeing there is very high. So for anybody who's looking at how do I deepen my knowledge, or how do I get more out of lean construction, that would certainly be a useful place to look at. I've mentioned a couple of times already the international group for lean construction, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And equally, for in terms of finding more information about the potential of working together between industry and academia around the area of lean and digital adoption, there's a number of different reference sites which I'd just like to bring to your attention as well. ResearchGate, Academia EDU, and there's also good old Google, but there is I suppose a branch of Google called Google Scholar, which will give you more refined answers than the general Google would do. So there's an IGLC in later this year, I think it's in next month, is taking place in Lima in Peru. It's a virtual conference this time around, so it's still possible for people to register for that if they want to. But one of the things that you can see there is that there's a full track or a full topic there on the area of lean and BIM. There is lean theory, but as you can see, most of the rest of the topics are very much about the applied nature of lean. And I suppose what I wanted to get across today in terms of this particular webinar is that I'm talking to you about, okay, how can industry and academia work together? What I want to do is, I suppose, take away the fear of the fact that if academics are working on lean projects or talking about digital adoption, they're doing it in some sort of theoretical sense. they're doing it disconnected from what the real world is. There's nothing could be further from the truth. This area of practice around lean and digital adoption, it could not be more embedded in actually applied research, the pure what is happening on the ground, and trying to, I suppose the benefit of academic collaboration with industry is that I suppose there's sometimes that ability to step back that isn't maybe possible when you're in the constant industry phase of constantly actually just trying to turn over projects and produce outputs on it. And on the right hand side there, I just have a listing of the track chairs and their associations, just so you can see how worldwide this activity is. And again, they're useful people to have a look at in terms of activities that they're doing. I mentioned as well the ResearchGate site, and again, it's just to bring to people's attention what is here. This is basically, it's kind of like the LinkedIn for academics. It's the or the social media site that would be available to it, and it's a very simple site to use. Anyone can register on it for free and get access to a range of different outputs. And what I'm showing you there is the listing of publications that can come out of it. These can be working papers, they can be papers that are published in formal journals, but they can equally be case studies of projects and activities that are being done jointly between industry and academia. So they can be a very good source of, if you're looking at, has anybody in the world already done this type of project before, or what might be available. So this is a good starting point on it. But one of the things that I want to highlight on it is, you can just see where the ring has shown up there. There's a question section. So if you happen to be working on a particular project and you're doing something in relation to either lean or digital adoption, and there's some query that you have, and you've maybe referred it to consultants, you've talked to other people in business, and you're not getting an answer from it, this is a really good site in that it actually has a free Q&A section where you can put a question out there into the ether, and you could have a researcher working in Peru or working in somewhere in the States or somewhere in the Netherlands, and they actually might be able to come up with an answer for you to the query that you happen to have. So it's certainly I'll be saying in a few minutes, I would like you to work with Irish academics, but of course there's no problem with going into the international space here as well. Equally on the site, there's listings of different institutions, different researchers. So if there is a particular problem or a particular aspect that you want to review, there are plenty of opportunities to engage with an academic community that is embedded in industry, but is in a worldwide basis. Academia.eu edu is another site of a similar nature. It's slightly more academic, but again, it has that opportunity to find information about projects that are ongoing and places where people have already done this work in the past. And this was just to say it in terms of specifically from a TU Dublin perspective in relation to this. TU Dublin is a signatory to an international movement around open research. So one of the things that we are very clear on as part of our mission is that any research that is actually being done in the organization that has been publicly funded should be available publicly for free. And therefore we have a free repository called Avril, which has the ability for you to look for any sort of publications around, and obviously I'm talking about lean construction here, but we have publications around any of the areas of activity that TU Dublin is involved in. And it basically means that you can get access to materials that normally would cost you hundreds of euro per year to actually sign up to journals and other reference sites to be able to get to. So, and as you can see on the screen capture I've had there, we've had 10 million downloads from this website, and that's international. So really, we're very fortunate that our organization had actually took a decision many years ago to make this open science available to the world. So I'd encourage you to have a look on that one. So we've been, I suppose, doing a bit of context setting there in terms of the international piece and why we should be looking at lean and digital adoption. Now I want to talk to you specifically, I suppose, about the opportunity around industry and academic partnerships and maybe why we should do more of it. So in relation to some of the Irish higher education institutions, the work that is going on them and how they're engaged around these two areas. You would have Lean Construction Ireland, so I'm a director on that, but equally so is Dr. Derek Sinnott from Waterford Institute of Technology and Trevor McSherry from IT Sligo. And we would be active on the board in terms of making sure that what is happening at Lean Construction Ireland level is also being filtered back into the full higher education sector. And we have a broader outreach than that. And we would have plans there as well to reach further into other of the HEIs. There's the Lean in Public Sector group, which my colleague Brian Clare is very active in, again, founded originally by Glenn Ballard, who is one of the authors of the last planner system. And that conference was due to happen in Dublin 2 years ago, but I think it got held up for a number of reasons. But again, public sector adoption of both lean and digital is going to make a huge difference to Project Ireland 2040. So that's a very important thing for us to be involved with. There are also groups in aligned areas such as higher education, manufacturing, supply chain, looking specifically at lean. And in terms of digital adoption, as well as those national projects that I mentioned coming under the Innovation and Digital Adoption group, subgroup of the construction sector group, we also would have activities within each of the professional bodies, and I've only listed a sample of them there, from the RIAI to EI to SCSI, and we would have the very active BIM regions coming out of the Construction IT Alliance that will be available there. So there's a range of activities that are already ongoing, and there are overlaps in there between industry and academia, but I suppose what I'm proposing here is an even better integration and more activity between the two of them. So just to give some idea of the sorts of work that can be done jointly between an industry partner and an academic partner, and these are just some that would have come out of TU Dublin as well. We've got work there around housing, we've got supply chains, we've got SMEs specifically being looked at, got work in relation to the Capital Works Management Framework, and we will be having conversations with the Office of Government Procurement, etc. And equally in specific areas such as mechanical electrical engineering around the HVAC systems, etc. So it's just an example, and all of those works are available on TU Dublin's Arrow system for download. But I suppose the other, just in terms of espousing why we should be working together for industry, why should you get involved? Is it not possible for you just to go on your lean journey on your own and to get the benefits on it? And I have to say, you know, we are very, very fortunate in Ireland in the some of the consultants that we have available to support organisations on their lean journeys. We have a significant range of supports through Enterprise Ireland, but equally we have now a list of commended training providers from that Lean Construction Ireland would have engaged with, who are rolling out the Lean Pass. And many of you may know that we also have a program going on to actually develop the next level of Lean Pass, which is fantastic. I mean, this is something that Ireland as a nation should be extremely proud of, that we're able to achieve this. So what I'm suggesting here in terms of the academic industry engagement is a supplement to that. It's not a replacement for it, it's a supplement to that support network that's already there within the sector. So I suppose one of the things that academia can provide is a safe space. You can have multiple different companies who have the same problems and the same issues coming together, sharing those problems in a safe space where it's not competitive, where nobody is gaining any advantage over anybody else, and working jointly towards solutions. And again, in terms of the development of the Lean Pass that would have been done through Lean Construction Ireland, that would have been a similar exercise. So I'm just proposing that on a higher level, or on a broader level, around a much wider range of topics and areas. There's also the holistic benefit that I'd like to raise, which is that the HEIs that you would be engaging with, they generally have an extremely broad portfolio that doesn't only include construction. So, I mean, ourselves in TU Dublin, you know, we've got 29,500 students across all of the STEM areas and business and science, etc., etc. And most of the other HEIs would be in that. So the advantage of that is that where problems arise or issues are brought from industry saying, well, how do we solve this? We're not only looking at our construction departments or our built environment areas or the engineering group. We can say, okay, we know somebody in our innovation centre, or we know somebody who works on manufacturing who has a topic area like this, and we can join that piece of thinking up together on it. And this would be similar to, I suppose, what's being achieved in Waterford in the Institute of Technology down there with the Academy of Lean Enterprise Excellence. and the ability that they've had to bring together groups from a range of different sectors to solve problems. And you know, the programs that they run out of there now would have a specific construction stream, when previously those programs might have originally started in areas of manufacturing or business or things like that. One of the other huge advantages that combined efforts between industry and academia can bring is it can help industry with access to funding. So all of the HEIs in Ireland would have different types of mechanisms for engaging with industry, whether it's through Knowledge Transfer Ireland, whether it's through having incubator networks, whether it's hot housing, etc. And there would be a range of different supports that would be available to companies. So again, it's kind of almost that one-stop shop, being able to come to a HEI and say, okay, the problem I have is X. And in order to solve that, you may need inputs from multiple different people with different backgrounds, but equally you might need a source of funding that's going to be able to help you to try and address this, because while long-term this may be a solution that's going to be a benefit to you, it might also be a benefit to multiple other people. So we would have had situations in the past where, for instance, there was a number of companies who were experiencing difficulty around problem X. We supported them to each go to Enterprise Ireland and get an innovation voucher. We pooled the innovation vouchers so that you can actually maximize the impact, and then you actually got a solution which all of the participants were able to share. But it's a better solution than any one of them would have been individually able to do that. And that innovation voucher then can lead to innovation partnerships. You can then become involved in SFI calls, so Science Foundation Ireland, and then ultimately leading to things like being able to draw down funds from the like of the Horizon Europe programme, which is a huge multi-billion euro opportunity. And you know, this isn't just something that academic organisations or research organisations, there's huge drive in all of the funding calls that have come out of Europe for involvement, particularly of SMEs, but equally of bigger companies as well. So there's a real opportunity there that by having conversations together, we can all move the sector and move the industry forward on it. So I suppose I'd just like to kind of bring to your attention one particular area that, again, this is a specific development in TU Dublin, but we would see this as being something that's a contribution to the national picture in terms of what construction needs and how we can help to move forward to deliver for Project Ireland 2040 with that platform of a really solid construction sector. And what we're doing is we're developing at Broombridge in Cabra a large facility which will be a centre for design and construction activities across priority areas that we have identified, which would include apprenticeship, aligning with the new national action plan for apprenticeship, around digitisation and digital adoption, around improving productivity for the sector, and innovation, driving innovation and actually improving what we're able to do, with an eye to the future, particularly around the fact that there are going to be skills shortages, reduced workforces, etc. How do we use innovation to meet the needs when we will have fewer people available to the sector? And this aligns with TU Dublin's strategic plan, where we actually have 3 pillars within the plan. We have people, planet, and partnership. And as we all know, everything about Lean is about respect for people. And that's, I suppose, maybe if I go back to the earlier slide where I was talking about people start with tools and then end up getting to the principles, it's, you know, one of the absolute key principles of Lean is respect for people. And that's something that we really want to bring to the forefront of how we educate our students, how the graduates that come out of our organisation are. But equally, we're very conscious of the fact that as the sector is moving forward, one of the things that we haven't really embraced as well in Ireland as we should do is lifelong learning, and reskilling, upskilling, changing skills in response to new technologies is something that we see as being very important. So that's something that the centre will focus on. Equally, planet is hugely important for TU Dublin. We're going to shortly have a Vice President for Sustainability, which is the first time that any higher education organisation in Ireland will have had somebody who is really focusing the HEI on that area as strongly as it is. And we would be seeing that any of the teaching that we do in the centre, any of the interaction with industry that we do, any research that we have available, will be focusing on making sure that what we do is sustainable, We're going to be looking at making the building smart, ensuring that our buildings perform to the standards that they need to, and equally that we always have a mind to circularity. Don't start using a material if you don't know where it's going to end up at end of life. Is it going to be reusable? And a real focus on that renovation space and renewal of what is already there. And then the third of our pillars, as I say, is partnership, and that's really about delivering shared impact. And I suppose that is the nub of what I've been talking to you about today. Even in the design of the building that we're actually putting together, we're designing the building and we're designing new curriculum and new activities to go into that building, but we're doing it all completely and totally in partnership with industry. We're doing that through the use of what we call our collaborative innovation teams, which are being set up around particular topics and particular target areas for the sector, focusing on those areas and bringing together groups of industry and academia to make sure that what we deliver in the centre is actually going to deliver for the sector, not just now, but into the future, and looking forward to the challenges that we would have around there. And just a final comment is just that we also have associated with the Design and Construct Centre, we have a construction technology cluster, which is funded by Enterprise Ireland. And the specific purpose of that particular cluster is around helping SMEs in particular to adopt new technologies, to improve their productivity, and to do all of that with a focus on internationalization, so that if we do come back to another cycle in terms of the construction sector and we do lose the range of work that we should have available in Ireland, that our SMEs are ready and able to work abroad and work in international markets. And having an underpinning of digital adoption, being able to work with digital tools and processes, but equally having a mindset that is a lean mindset, will enable that to work properly. So you may hear more in relation to that construction technology cluster over the next number of months, as our education outreach manager starts to reach out more into the sector to show people what it is that we're going to be able to help them to achieve. So that was the wrap up for me in terms of what I wanted to say around lean and digital adoption, the opportunity that is there for industry and academia to work through. And I'm happy now to take a few questions and hope that you got some benefit out of that. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Avril. I'd like to thank Avril for her very insightful presentation. We'll now move on to Q&A. And as Avril just said there, if you have any questions, just type them into the question pane on your control panel. Avril, first question. If a company wanted to start collaborating with a technological university, institute of technology, or other education group in relation to lean construction and digital adoption, how can they do that?
Great. Okay, thanks for that, Susan. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I alluded to it in the presentation, but just to emphasize again, it really is a case of there's an open door there. So all of our organizations, through our web pages, etc., we would have access to whether it's innovation centers, knowledge transfer centers, hothouses, or even direct approaches to any academic. We're normally very, very open to the idea of any sort of collaboration. And it's something that I suppose we need to make sure that we're reaching out a little bit better in order to do it. So using social media channels as well, nearly most of our academics will be visible on LinkedIn, etc. So really, I suppose it's very much a case of, don't think that an approach will be turned away. Everybody is very, within the HEI sector, we're very willing to have those engagements and would welcome approaches through any of those media, whether it's, as I say, websites, social media, or any other channels. And as I mentioned before, myself, Derek Sinnott, and Trevor McSherry are on the board of LCI. So our details are all up on the LCI website, and we'd be happy to channel any communications that come in to somebody who might be more regionally close to you, or who would have more expertise in a particular area that you'd want to come to.
Okay, that's great. Look, another question for you. Some academic outputs are just that, academic or too theoretical. How can this be made operational for use in industry rather than just being a report sitting on a shelf?
Okay, so what we would have in relation to that is, I was trying to emphasize it during the talk, but I'll say it again. Really, most of the HEIs that are in Ireland we're very much focused on the fact that graduates need to go out, be able to go out and work in the sector. And we need to be producing outputs that actually are applicable. So, for instance, it was mentioned in the bio, I would have been involved with a project called BIMCert, which was an EU-funded project. We were working with 7 partners across different countries, including the Construction Industry Training Board of Northern Ireland, and Belfast Metropolitan College were leading it. And one of the things in that particular project was about using BIM skills, digital adoption, particularly for SMEs in relation to energy efficiency. But one of the things that we really did was we were focused on producing training materials and doing it in a way that was accessible just in time for industry in the way that they need it. And while we knew from the outset that we wanted to do something more or less around it, we spent an awful lot of time engaging with the sector to actually find out what it was that their requirements are. So I think that's something that nearly all academic work now has focused on, and people can be reassured that we don't start off a piece of work and go, we think we know what's best for the sector. That's absolutely not what we want to do. There's very much a really strong piece of let's listen to industry, let's make sure we completely understand their requirements. And for those of you from a BIM background, it's like asking the plain language questions. Make sure you understand what it is that the client actually wants before you go off and develop it, and then check and recheck and recheck. Don't just ask once, go off and do what you think they want, and then come back with something at the end, and then there'll be a quibble over, well, I thought you meant this, I thought you meant that. So it was a little bit of a long-winded answer, Susan, but it's very much a case of we would see ourselves as making sure and putting in lots of checks and balances to make sure that we find out what it is industry wants and make sure that it is applicable and usable in the real world.
Absolutely. Getting to some good comments in for your presentation. Said it was well done, and thank you. Very clear and understandable presentation. A question from attendee: do you think there is still some misconception that academia and industry are two sides of the same coin, but a void still remains? If so, how do we reduce that void?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I suppose it kind of leads on a little bit from the last one that I was saying. We do. I mean, there is always, I suppose, a risk that industry, or that we in academia don't reach out enough to industry or don't make our outputs as obvious as we should. But I think most programs in the construction and built environment and engineering areas at this stage have work placement programs. That's a hugely important element to making sure that as students are going through their activities and the courses that they're doing, that they will spend some period of time in industry, but equally it means that the academics who are running those programs are continuously in contact with industry going, this graduate or this intern that you have for a period, are they fulfilling your requirements? Do they have the skills that you need? So there's like an iterative loop there to actually find out. And I was talking to an industry leader this morning, and we were only just saying about how that can't be a lip service piece. That really, it needs to be a meaningful conversation around, you expected an intern or a graduate come into you with this particular set of skills. If they didn't, what can we do to fix it? And is that an expectation thing, or is it a case of we're not teaching the right skills in the right order, etc.? In terms of overall research, I suppose, like rather than taking it on courses, but if you take it in terms of an actual research piece, again, we certainly in TU Dublin and most of the other IoTs, we don't do so much of the blue skies research. It tends to be that we are engaged with industry, we find where the problems are, we're made aware of those problems. And I'd be, again, that comes back to the open door piece. We would love to hear more about the issues that people have, the things that people are saying, God, I have this data set. If only I could get somebody to spend a bit of time working with it, I think we could get something useful out of it. And for instance, we've got, there's programs now coming in construction analytics where it's looking at data sets. So people are building up this sets of data, but yet they don't know how to be able to turn that around into a business process that improves how they do. So we're very, very open to those. So we tend to do research that is focused on questions that come directly to us from industry. So the more we can open up those conversations, the better.
Yeah, definitely. Another question in, do you see public funded projects requiring lean in the same manner that LEED developed?
That's a very good question. I don't see the demand for it coming, let's say, within the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, we've been waiting for a BIM mandate now for what? So, I mean, the UK brought in the BIM mandate in 2016. We still only have a small element of it within the government works. I think that there will be elements of it. There was some work being done in Lean Construction Ireland around pre-qualification tenders or pre-quals for tenders, and the potential for Lean to actually be built into that, as it has been built into some private sector contracts. So I think that's a piece of work that we should really probably take back up again and engage with the Office of Government Procurement. I think that through the client forum that Richard Fitzpatrick is leading, there would be some activity going around there. So I don't see it on the horizon yet, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't like to see it. I think it would definitely bring benefit to the sector.
Okay, perfect. We have time for one more question. Are there tangible benefits to a company in relation to getting involved with academic groups beyond those on the presented slides?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I suppose one of the things is that money always talks. So certainly, academic groups generally tend to be spending a lot of their time trying to figure out where the next funding source comes from. And to a large extent, a lot of funding sources at the moment require that to be done in partnership with industry. So that's certainly a tangible benefit that can come to companies. I suppose otherwise, it comes back to maybe some of those things I was saying earlier about the graduates and about interns and about research. If you don't engage with us, then you can't really maybe say afterwards, well, you're not doing the sort of work that I think I need. So I think it's very much a case of, we want to hear more, we try and do what we can in terms of outreach, but the benefit to a company of engaging with industry or with academia is very much a case of, whatever your problems are, they're the things that then become our problems. We take them up and we run with them and hopefully can come up with solutions around them. So I think two benefits there, definitely. It's the financial one is definitely there, and then the other one would be around actually, I suppose, driving the agenda, making sure that when courses are being developed, they're the ones that are the right ones. When research is being undertaken, it's the one that will solve the problems that are your pain points, that are causing you your difficulties.
Okay, we're just going to squeeze one more in. Sorry. How important do you think the collaboration between Lean Construction institutes around the world to disseminate the global culture of Lean?
Oh, I think it's very important. Look, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. I know that obviously different markets have different, let's say, regulatory environments to deal with. They have different cultures, etc. But ultimately, there's more to be gained from sharing than there is from doing things completely and utterly independently. And equally, I suppose one of the other big things is that construction is very much a global industry. You look at the McKinsey reports now, and you can just see that one of the biggest drivers in the construction sector is around organizations getting scale so that they can work on international projects, they can work internationally. And I suppose that's one of the reasons as well why we have Enterprise Ireland funding this construction cluster to help companies with internationalization. So I think it's very important that we do look at what's going on in other jurisdictions, what research outputs they have, what practitioner outputs they're sharing, because we can all benefit from it and we can all learn something from what's going on there.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Avril. Sincerest thanks again to Avril for today's webinar presentation. Please note that a copy of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who attended. The next webinar is due to take place on the 21st of July with a presentation by Peter Lonergan from Ardmach on the topic of Lean Construction, Benefits and Challenges of Lean in Design. For information on this and other webinars, the annual conference, the annual book of cases and other LCI resources, please visit leanconstructionireland.ie and follow the Lean Construction Ireland LinkedIn group page. Finally, thank you to everyone who attended today, and we very much look forward to meeting you at future Lean Construction Ireland webinars. Have a lovely day. Thanks, Avril.
Thank you. Bye-bye.